Howdy, I'm Jace. I have sex addiction and I get to work with a lot of other people do too. How does sex addiction differ from other addictions? It's a great question with a big problem already in the beginning. We're going to talk about that in today's video. But first, a reminder, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell button so you get alerted when new videos come out. You can subscribe to my newsletter on my website in order to get updates and information about different things going on. And stick around to the end of the video because I have a free resource waiting there for you. So, how does sex addiction differ from other addictions? First, we have to address this idea of addictions, plural, and multiple addictions. I don't believe in them. And we're finding more and more as we study the brain that there's addiction as a misfunction of the brain. It's not like, we have drug addiction here and sex addiction lives over here and gambling addictions over here and alcohol addiction somewhere in the middle. No, that's not what's going on. Addiction is an actual thing. It's not an elusive set of behaviors. It is a misfunctioning of the brain, which you can learn about in other videos or by going to my website to take the Introduction to Sex Addiction course or the course on what addiction really is. But we're talking about a function of the brain that has to do with the reward system and the engagement of different chemicals and functions within our body. Now, many things are built in to the reward system to motivate us to continue in those behaviors, like bonding and connection and sex and food, high caloric food, and different things like that. The chemical process itself and those boosts and the functioning of the reward system is really what we're talking about with addiction. The pornography itself isn't addictive. The person themselves isn't the addiction. The substance isn't the addiction. We're really just talking about how they're reacting with our brain and body, which is the same process for all of them. Drugs differ a little because they're not just using our reward system, they're mimicking our chemicals. But for the most part, we're talking about the chemical process going on. And that is what the addiction is. So it's not that there are multiple things going on. It's just that multiple things trigger that. Now, based on how much or how often you've engaged with different things, whether that's behaviors or substances, you'll have a stronger cycle. You'll have deeper grooves in the brain and throughout the systems of the body tied to that because they've been looped more and more, right? So we might gravitate towards different things because we have utilized them more often and we have created this cycle with them in the brain. So for me, that was sexual reacting out. For others, that might be substances or gambling or food or shopping, depending on what their initial go-to was. I have some theories about what leads to that, but we'll talk about those in another video. So for me, I didn't engage in drugs really at a point, certainly when I was younger, when this all is developing, and very rarely as an adult. And so even if I have, it doesn't have the same effect on the brain as something like pornography would for me, because I've pushed that button, that reward cycle button, so many times with pornography that is really ingrained in my brain. And of course, over the years, I've been healing that and actually healing my brain, which is what we do with recovery and why sobriety is so important, to heal the brain. So it might look like someone has multiple addictions if they've engaged with different things that work with the reward system. But really, it's the same process going on in the brain. So if we abstain from all of the things that trigger that system, we actually heal the brain, which is what's called holistic recovery, when we're really taking care of all of those things, and then the behaviors and the lifestyle and the mentality and everything that goes with it. That's what we're talking about when we say holistic recovery. As a result, sex addiction doesn't actually show up differently in the brain. It is engaging in all of those things. And yes, sex is built into our survival system because reproduction is necessary for the survival of our species. So we have built-in motivators in our brains and bodies to ensure that we continue that behavior. Because it's linked in, it's baked in to that reward system, it triggers it just as any of these other things do. So the behaviors might look different and might even seem bizarre to some people. A lot of people really struggle to understand how sex and sexual behaviors can be addiction. And we have a video on that. You can check that out if you want more info. But we're really just talking about things that engage the reward system, and sex definitely does, and it shows up the same way. And as a result, because that reward system is tied to our survival system, so because that's why we're being rewarded, to be motivated to do the things that keep us alive and make us survive and make sure our species survives, sex is just the same as any other addiction. And I'm not just talking about sex, the act, but all of the things that fit on that spectrum of sexual behavior, whether that's fantasy or voyeurism or exhibitionism or intrigue or compulsively being on the apps or masturbation or pornography or romantic intrigue, whatever. There's so many different things that show up under this umbrella that we just call sex addiction because it has to do with our sexual energy and using that to manipulate the chemistry of our brain. So though we have a tough time in our society of talking about or looking at anything that has to do with sexuality or sexual expression, so we don't like to throw that in the mix that can be addiction, but it's not the act itself. It's not the content itself. It's really just how that triggers the reward system and the survival system in the brain. And because it is tied in there, it can be addiction. It can become compulsive and move into addiction. And then we're going to see the same embarrassingly cliche behaviors and story that go along with any area of addiction. I hope that's helpful to you. If you have more questions about sex addiction, check out the rest of the videos on this playlist, the sex addiction Q&A. That's exactly what we're here doing. We're answering questions about sex addiction. We're breaking down some of these myths, and we're just coming up to date with what we know now about the brain, the body, our behaviors, and how we're out here in the world. Thank you so much for your time. I always love spending a little bit of it with you. Don't miss that free resource that's coming up. And you can always get more on my website, www.jacedowney.com. Check the description for more info. Until I see you next time, stay curious. Hello again. I have one of my all-time favorite things to get to offer you, and I'm so excited that I can offer it to you for free. I've taken one of my favorite workshops to give and condensed it down into a mini course that you can take online at your convenience whenever you want. I'm going to be talking about how to go from powerless to empowered, not just with regard to addiction, but life in general. You can get that by clicking on the link below at no cost to you.